Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 14th episode of Tides of Lore. My name is Robert Silva. I am one half of your host team, joined as always by my good friend Tim. How you doing today, Tim?
I'm doing well. PvPing, trying to get to 2,000 rating. We're doing it, man. We're like 1900 something, low 1900s. Pretty fun, dude. I like it. What about you,
well,
man?
You've grinded all the way up from 1600 since we last recorded. So.
Yeah, man. The Battleground Blitz is super fun. And I feel like it's easy to get rating because it's like you either win or you lose.
That's usually how you get it.
Right? It's like you win or you lose, right? It's like 50-50 chance, pretty much. So it's fun,
Do
though.
you have a disc priest?
Yeah, this priest or...
Congratulations, you win.
Yeah, they're really good. It took like 3 of us to kill one. Maybe 4 of us. You, though, you got the Zekfir mount, didn't you?
I did. I was inspired by your video, and this weekend I finally reinstalled all of my retail add-ons, and it admittedly still took me at least probably 9 hours of playing, going off of how many elixirs I ended up using.
How many tries do you think? You think around 100?
It wasn't tracking it, but yeah, I would say probably around 100, because each run would... It was hard to tell, because like a good run would last like 7 minutes, right? A bad run would last like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say probably 100, maybe more. Did find some ways that made it easier, specifically from a lot of the content that you shared in your video.
I saw you comment.
Yeah. I figured I'd share with the people what I've learned from my experience as a non-mana user and a leather user.
Yeah, that mount ends the 25th, I think. So go work, man.
Oh yeah, I'm so happy that I was able to get that done. And now I'm gonna go grind some Plunderstorm, see if I can't get some of those mounts before the 25th.
All right, yeah, I'll help you out. Yeah, we'll go plunder it up.
Yes, sir. But last episode we started off learning about Varian Wrynn and his story that leads into classic World of Warcraft, which is kind of where we're at now with his story. And most of this was a little bit before, if not just slightly as it starts. But what do you remember about that episode?
I remember Varian getting captured and then split in 2. There was like 2 different versions of him, almost like a strong and a weak version. I think that's simplifying it, but that's how I took it. And like one of the versions like got away and knocked out, got his memory like wiped out. And he was like a gladiator, just like fighting his way. And yeah, he like met up with 2 other people. They found some crazy relic. It like was corrupt or something.
They eventually escape their keeper, who is basically making them slaves as gladiators, and he helps out his one companion Brawl to go and cleanse himself of his rage, basically, that is kind of dealt with corruption of fell magic, that damn fell magic always. And they kind of just do a whole like world tour of Kalimdor until where we're getting to now in the story, where they eventually meet up in Theramore with Jaina Proudmoore and Aegwynn, the first people who were like, this guy might be the Lost King of Stormwind.
Oh, and they finally recognized that. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, there was a lot of people from the Alliance who just didn't know who he was.
Yeah, that is hilarious to me. But
now they do.
But now they do.
Okay, and that's where we're starting off right now?
For the most part, yeah. As soon as they arrive in Eastern Kingdoms, there will already be plenty of people who recognize him.
Good, okay.
So, just to move on from that, we had a few comments on the last episode of Tides of Lore. Not the last episode at this point. It's going to be 2 episodes back because we record this one week in the future. So, the last episode that we had was the Origins episode about the Dark Iron and the dwarves and the cosmic origins of the world. And just to start off with some of those, we have the Away fan saying, I enjoyed this first part a lot. Seems like a lot of the elemental lords were taken from Greek mythology. And he asked a few questions saying, do the gnomes and dwarves have regular sized folk? What's the difference between them height wise? I imagine that a gnome is shorter than a dwarf, but why is a gnome smarter? And yeah, I felt like some decent questions. I did get some feedback that it was definitely our most confusing episode that we've uploaded yet from someone who doesn't know the Warcraft perspective. So I thought we'd quickly go over an answer to some of these questions, and I did type him out a whole paragraph of information, but basically I just said, like, yeah, a lot of the Warcraft cosmic beings are referenced to different pantheons across of all mythology in the real world. So like the Titan Keepers are named after Norse and Egyptian gods like Ra, Tyr, Odin, Freya, and even Loken being a reference to Loki. So we talked about that. It's a little bit about the height difference between gnomes and dwarves, how dwarves are like 4 feet tall and gnomes are like 3 feet tall, basically. And then just the major question of why are gnomes smarter? That I thought was a real key part of it was that they come from the Titan Keeper Mimron, who is a reference to the Norse god Mimir. Well, not god, he's just technically a figure in mythology, but he is the renowned figure in Norse mythology for his wisdom and intelligence. So the mecha gnomes were kind of the embodiment of the Titan's intelligence, as well as the earthen were likely referenced from the Sons of Ivaldi from Norse mythology, who are like the master craftsmen who actually forge the gods' weapons, like Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, and they're dwarfs in Norse mythology. So that is probably how that lines up there.
I remember in Old War, Mimron, he was like the boss you kill for Mimron's head, I think, too, if you do like hard mode. But like he was like a tinkerer. He was like a gnome, but like a robot gnome. And he seemed, really smart.
He used to have a different body before that event. He actually, like, I can't remember entirely why, but the Mechanomes actually made him the mechanical version of his body. Before that, he was kind of just like the regular Titan Keepers.
Oh, really?
And we'll probably get into more of that as we move into Wrath of the Lich King. But yeah, that is his story. We also had Brady Sword 11, welcome back, saying, damn, now I want to make a dwarf in World of Warcraft. And he said, that Titan ripped an old god out of the planet like a zit. And we just responded basically saying, well, I guess now's the real question of, do you want to be a Bronzebeard or a Dark Iron?
Dark Iron's cooler, I think.
I think so too. And
they have fire beards, dude. You can't really...
And even their loading screen, like, or their like splash screen for when you're loading in his character looks fucking awesome.
Their racial...
Like Blackrock Mountain.
Their racial mounts are cooler. I think they have better racials.
I don't know any of that stuff. To me, I'm the guy that forgets to use my racial in most of the classes, especially in retail, bro. If it's not the classic troll racial, it's not in the rotation. Don't know what to tell you. But then also, lastly, we have been sharing a lot more of some shortened stories from our previous videos on TikTok and Instagram, as well as YouTube Shorts that you guys might have seen. And last week, we ended up posting one about the story of Invincible from Arthas' story, basically how he raised this horse and eventually re-raised this horse as an undead. And we did have Zolo Puppy over on TikTok saying, thank you for this. I love the tale about Invincible and the bond with Arthas. The foreshadowing of his death and that leads up to the calling of Strathholm is truly chilling. And I thought that was a great comment because it's like kind of what I said. Arthas is really defined by the moment that Invincible dies, and he makes the promise that anyone that he can save, he will save them.
Liar.
Save them in their own unique way. Save them from the suffering of life.
Holy moly.
But that is all we have for our previous episodes, and we are going to move into this latest episode, the second half of Varian Wrynn. Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Tides of Lore on YouTube, or if you're on Spotify, leave us a 5-star rating. It really helps the channel and ensures you won't miss a moment of this adventure. Now let's get started. Last time we did leave off, we had, like we said, Varian meeting up with Jaina Proudmoore as well as Aegwynn and Theramore. They tell him about who he is, and he reunites with all 2 of his companions, Brawl, Baremantle, and Valera Sanguinar from the Fighting Pits. And they are making their way currently on a ship over to the Eastern Kingdom so that they can handle the corruption of Onyxia and other things that are going on in the Eastern Kingdom. So let's get started. As Varian and his companions are sailing across the sea on this ship, he ends up telling them about his legacy. Brawl already knows, but they're kind of just going back and forth. They're like, do we need to bow to you now? Or are you going to be a snob about this? And he's like, no. And he says something that I thought was really interesting. He's like, I don't even know if I want to be this Varian figure. I was kind of content just being the champion Logush, because up to this point in the story, no one referred to him as Varian. He was Logush. And he kind of goes back and forth with him. He's like, I don't really necessarily want to be this figure. But then he thinks about his son, Anduin, and he's like, but I know that I can't just choose that life. It's not fair to my son or necessarily fair to anyone else that needs me in Stormwind. So he kind of resolves that issue in his mind. But there is also this point in the story as they're crossing over the sea where once again the Naga show up, and the Naga are like, get out of our lands.
You can't catch a break with them, man.
No, this entire story, he's going anywhere, and it's just like, and then we're attacked by dwarves, and then we're attacked by, and this time they're attacked by Naga. But it is actually one of the, I guess, the troop of Naga that attacked the island back when he was on Alkaz Island. It's the same leader. And she has a name, but I don't remember it, and it's also not super relevant. But she has this powerful arcane, like, scepter. And she summons up a Leviathan from the ocean. And as all these Naga are, like, attacking the ship, and this Leviathan, like, squid monster kind of thing is smashing their ship, they pop into action, and they're fighting. Logesh goes crazy, as he does usually. But Valera is actually where we're going to kind of start her subplot. She ends up rushing at this sorceress who's in the water. And she's like, if I can get that scepter away from her, then we will, be much better off. So she jumps at her and she grips the fucking scepter out of her hands as she kind of splashes into the water. And this is an interesting little story because it kind of implies that any time that a blood elf were to use a magical item, that they begin to give into mana addiction. Because she seems to have been separated from her mana dependencies since she was a little girl. She was a tiny, like a small child during the events of Quel'Thalas. And she's, like I said, grown into more of an adult by this point. But a Brawl dives in after her, turns into one of his forms that he's reclaimed back after purifying the idol, and turns into a seal. Let's go, druids. And he goes to dive down deep into the water because she's also getting dragged under the water now by these Naga. And he, grabs her, he takes her back up to the surface, and he shatters this scepter into pieces. And she is already kind of, pissed off about this. Because, I guess that is just how dependent on mana the blood elves are in this story. She's already like, why would you do my precious?
Wasn't she a rogue? Am I wrong on that?
She is a rogue.
So she doesn't even use mana. She touches the staff of power and it suddenly just gets addicted to it that easily.
I should mention way earlier in the story when they're just in the cage and she's arguing back and forth with Brawl. She does have innate spellcasting abilities because she does drain his mana just as a way to get back at him for him pissing her off, which, like we discussed kind of in the Blood Elf episode, is their actual racial ability of Arcane Torrent. So she does have some innate magical ability, but yeah, this is where we see it kind of is pretty intense for Blood Elves. But Varian is just fighting everybody on this ship, and he fucking throws some harpoons and actually slays the massive Leviathan too. And I was just like, Jesus, this man really cannot be stopped. And that is when the leader of these Naga actually goes up to him and begins to try and cast a spell with her hands. And she does get it off. She basically lightning bolts him straight in the face. And this is the event actually that leaves him with the scar that goes across the bridge of his nose as well as across one of his eyes, because he just gets lightning bolted straight in the face. And as he does get this lightning bolt strike his face, he gets flooded with more memories about who he was. Like we mentioned, he did gain a few of his memories. He still doesn't entirely know everything that's happened, but he does remember certain things, specifically like when he was sailing away with Lothar on the boat, as well as he remembers weeping over Tiffin's coffin during her death.
And every time he gets hurt, he just gets more?
I guess it's kind of like the way that they used to try and shock therapy people, right? And it kind of unlocks some of his memories by this electrical surge. Like I said, also, this is the Naga that attacked him when he was on the island. So maybe that is part of the reason why he's like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
But after this, he literally just slashes her in half. Half her body goes flying. And it is probably the coolest panel in this entire comic, in my opinion. Because as his two companions are getting back up onto the boat, they see this happen. And then he just looks over at the rest of the Naga that are on the ship. And there's blood running down his face. And he's just like, I have some questions for you. And they just literally piss themselves and dive off the boat and run away.
Don't want nothing to do with them.
It was his face in it too. He just looks feral, bro. It looks insane. But also, there is a mention that Valera has where she says that after this happens and they're getting ready to continue across the sea, she looks up at the sky, and while the storm clouds are kind of pulling overhead of them, she swears that one of them takes the form of a massive wolf blotting out the sun.
Oh gosh.
Which is also kind of the reason that I imply that Goldrin, the wild god that's just like of fury, doesn't seem to necessarily be entirely gone from the world of Azeroth. And we see wild gods come back all the time after having their visit in Ardenweald, so it's not too far-fetched to think of. But they're dead. They are very, very dead. And that is actually where we, just before he arrives, check back in Stormwind. They're having a massive celebration for the return of their king. And there is a whole parade going on led by Katrana Prestor. And it said, she's telling everyone, like, yeah, we just rescued the lost king from ransom from these Naga. And this is actually where you have the other half, the doppelganger of Varian, who has returned, and he is kind of the noble half, and he is, confidently riding his horse with a big smile on his face. And a bunch of people are like, isn't it kind of weird how he's like got such a big smile on his face? I don't think I've ever seen him smile since Tiffin died.
Isn't he just getting controlled by her?
Oh yeah, absolutely. He is completely being mind controlled by Katrana.
Right.
And even Anduin is there. He's now like probably like maybe 10 years old, 11 or something like that. And he's riding alongside him, and he's trying to bring up the fact that he's like, hey, Dad, like, I'm really happy you're back, but like people are super upset because they're getting taxed to shit now. And there's a bunch of rumors about these dark iron dwarves starting to go crazy over in the Red Ridge Mountains. Do we have any plans for that? And he's just like, Katrana will handle that, son. Don't you worry. And he's like, but the people. And then he says, the people will always complain. That's just what they do.
Right. And Katrana doesn't want to do any investigating of the Dark Iron because she wants to spread mayhem.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also the Dark Iron, it's difficult to say because, like, the Black Dragons are corrupted by the Old Gods, right? And so are the Elemental Lords. So it seems to kind of line up that they are at least working together to some degree.
Well, yeah, she just doesn't want to send resources to go fight in, like, Searing Gorge or anything over there.
Yes, indeed. So this is actually where the first time, I think, in the story that we really encounter Bolvar Fordragon, who is a paladin, a warrior. Do you know?
It looked like he was doing some paladin stuff when he was confronting Onyxia when you did the quest line, but I'm not sure. He could just be a warrior.
Well, I'm going to say that he is a paladin until I am corrected, because that's what I'm thinking. He's got a very paladin name. But yeah, he just brushes both of them off, being like, yeah, the kingdom will always have problems. They're just pesky complaints. And Anduin looks to Bolvar and he says, that's not my dad. And that's where we'll meet back up with our true king Varian, Logush, the champion gladiator, who is arriving in Menethil Harbor, which is the Alliance outpost in the wetlands to the north of Dunmorrow. Kind of in the same area that Grim Batol, where the Wildhammers originally built their new city at. And they arrive. There's a dwarven scout that was sent by the Bronzebeards, because I guess Jaina Proudmoore or something like that sent word that, hey, there's an MVP arriving on the shores of the Eastern Kingdoms, and you should probably, make sure he gets to where he's going. And they send a man by the name of Thargras Anvilmar. And I'm just going to call him Anvilmar. You might have remembered that surname because he is the descendant of the king of the dwarfs before the War of the Three Hammers. And he is one of two of the remaining of that descendants. And he decides to discreetly follow these people because they don't actually tell him who he's looking for. They're just like, an MVP is arriving. So he's following Valera and Brawl and Varian when they go to they're like, maybe we should turn in for the night or some shit. And as they're going to enter a tavern, they get bumped into by a man, and the man falls down to the ground, and he's like, watch where you're going. And then he looks up and he sees Varian's face, and he just pisses himself, and he starts screaming, you should be dead, you should be dead. And he just goes running off to another tavern.
Okay, very interesting.
And it's revealed real quickly why he's saying this, because as he goes bolting off, they're like, well, he might tell, greater forces about what's going on. We should definitely go see what he knows. So he goes and follows Tim to where he went to run into. And he goes in, and the three of them slam open the door, and they're like, hey, oh, shit. And this entire tavern is filled with Defias Brotherhood.
Oh, no.
At first, they're like talking to the guy that ran in screaming, and they're like, no, you're clearly just way too drunk. We killed him. And he's like, oh, yeah? Then why is he right there in the doorway? And they all look, and they just immediately draw swords and start casting magic. And he's like, I guess it's going to be a fight. And this is where Anvilmar joins up with them, and they all just go crazy on them. Something I did find really interesting is that in the first volume of these comics, which is the events that we spoke about last episode, it's kind of censored on the violence. Like, a lot of people lose their arms and stuff, but there's not like a ton of blood and stuff like that. And then you get to this volume, and they're killing like actual humans and stuff, and the blood is just everywhere. It's like a berserk comic with just how much they are just smashing skulls in, and bodies are getting, bloodily spewed across the room. It is crazy.
I kind of like that vibe. I wish they stuck with it.
I'm here for it.
Yeah.
I am so here for it. But yeah, they start swinging swords. They start fighting with each other. And actually, something I guess I should have mentioned is that Valera, as she was getting off the ship, begins to show signs of mana withdrawal. I guess just from touching that one magical artifact. So she's literally got the shakes, and she's got, stuff like that going on. And Brawl's like, I told you shouldn't have touched that artifact. And she's just like, yeah, that's just night elf propaganda. We're not that bad. She's wrong.
As she's in withdrawal.
Yeah, literally.
The first step is, I think the first stage is denial.
Yeah, there it is. And her denial step goes on for quite a while, but they do clear out most of this room. And there's even one of these mages that she sneaks up behind, and while no one's really looking, she just sucks all of the mana out of him. Oh my god, this cat. You always make my life hell when I'm recording.
Which one?
Milk! My fat boy.
Oh, yeah.
I will give you attention when I'm done.
Destiny was trying to get rid of Milk.
Yeah, she was trying to pawn him off for Ollie, I heard. But as this is going on, the fight ends, and there's like one remaining that is supposedly the leader. And they're interrogating him, and Varian's like, what do you want? Why are you doing this? And he doesn't really tell him anything. He just basically says, we're going to kill your son and kill everyone that you love. And he goes to use the last of his mana, basically, to cast a spell, when Valera then drains that mana out of him too and drives a dagger into his chest. And everyone in the room's like, what the fuck? We were still talking with that guy. And she's like, you don't even understand. I just saved your life. But this is where Brawl really begins to see her symptoms of her mana withdrawal. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I really don't think you should keep doing that. It's bad for you. And she's, again, just blows it off. But they then decide to actually turn in for the night. I don't know where they sleep, or they leave all these bodies here or what, but, you think someone might be upset about it? It's fine.
No one looks into it. No one finds them.
They just peek into that tavern and they're like, I think I'm going to go to the one next door, actually. So we come in at the next morning, and then they are getting ready to head to Ironforge because Anvilmar is like, yeah, my king wants to talk with you. And he's like, all right, well, that's on the way to Stormwind, so it works out for me. And as they're leaving, one of these, like, shady vendors tries to offer Valera a fell-touched knife. And once again, she's kind of going through withdrawals from the mana problems. And she seemingly can't really control herself as she begins to reach for this knife. And as soon as she touches it, she says that it was the most magical power that she's ever felt in her life. And Brawl slaps it out of her hand and is like, are you fucking stupid? Like, do you have any idea what Fel did to me?
A good friend right there. This is insane.
Yeah. And she's all snappy and whatnot, but the Fel energy actually sets off the Nightsaber, or just cat that she's on. She's riding on a cat. They all seem to have their actual racial mounts that they would have if you were playing Warcraft, except Blood Elves ride Hawkstriders, but that's it's not here nor there. The cat feels this energy and just bolts off with her on the back, and she's barely hanging on as they just go rushing into the wetlands, and they are basically unable to control this mount as they run directly into all the raptors that sit outside the wetlands. Once again, we get like a fight scene, and they're fighting, and Valera is just like, I don't need your guys' help. I don't need you telling me what to do. As they're fighting all of these raptors, they kill the raptors and begin to cook them up for dinner, which respectable.
Yeah.
I think. I guess I've always been kind of curious what raptor meat would taste like.
It looks good, at least the icon.
So they're sitting there. Valera's not really sitting with the camp, and Brawl is kind of telling everyone, like, we really need to keep an eye out on her because she is going off the chain. And this is, once again, where we snap back to Stormwind. And when Katrana hears that Varian is still alive, and he is now in the Eastern Kingdoms. So she's like, God damn it. Can't find good help these days. So she ends up hiring another assassin to go and deal with Varian. And this is actually a blood elf warlock, and he goes by the name of Vendolin Soulfire. We have never encountered this character before, and to be honest with you, I don't think we ever see him again. So, like, a lot of the characters that we're going to encounter during this portion of the comic are characters that you would actually go into a dungeon and fight and kill and stuff like that. This guy seems to just kind of be there. After this, King Magni arrives in Stormwind, and he tries to go to Varian and be like, look, I'm super happy you're back, but for realsies, there is Dark Irons, and they're starting to do some fuck shit over in Blackrock Mountain, I'm telling you. And at first, Varian is just like, yeah, that's fine. I'm not really interested in that. How about a boar hunt? And again, dwarves are kind of stubborn, and they're also really prideful, and he's just like, what the fuck is your problem, bro?
Just a casual boar hunt. Come on, let's get it going.
You got time, right? Yeah. But as King Magni's getting all super pissed off and getting tired of Varian just ignoring his problems, and the only person seeming to listen to his problems in Stormwind is Bolvar, he's like, fuck it. You guys aren't going to be help. I should get back to my kingdom, because apparently that's where I'm most needed right now. So he goes to hop on an airship back over to Dunmoreau. And as he's getting ready, Anduin approaches him. And he's like, hey, Magni, like, you've known me since I was a wee tot. I'm telling you that there is something wrong with my dad, and I don't really know what's going on. And one of his other soldiers approaches him and tells him, oh yeah, the Dark Irons, they just took the Thandol Span. And you remember back in the Origins episode, we mentioned that the Thandol Span was those two massive bridges that connected the Wildhammer territory of Airy Peak and the wetlands to where the Bronzebeards are in Dunmoreau. And it was a symbol basically of their unity. And you hear that one of the bridges has been blown up. That's actually why in classic World of Warcraft, when you go to the Thandol Span, there's only one bridge remaining.
I was going to say, it's pretty decrepit now, but it was actually blown up. Who blew that up?
Oh, those damn Dark Irons.
It's also to break kind of a symbolic relationship as well.
Exactly. So he basically looks at Varian at that moment, and he's just like, see, I told you, like, are you going to send people now? And Bolvar's like, yeah, we're going to send people. And then Varian's like, actually, no, I don't think we should. We have our own problems. And it sounds like a familial problem, basically, which, again, just even calling the Bronzebeards family, even though they do technically originate from, like, the Earthen and all that together, calling them family with the Dark Irons is really just a slap in the face to Magni, especially because at this point his daughter has already been kidnapped by the Dark Irons.
Right. Still with them, right?
So he is just like, oh, fuck you, buddy. He hops on his airship and he's like, we're going to the Thandol Span now. And they go and they fly this goblin airship over to the Thandol Span. That's where we check back in with the other group. And this time we now have them en route to Ironforge when they are set upon by Dark Irons. And at this point, Valera, when she's not actually constantly draining mana, she starts being kind of dog shit in combat. Like, she'll go to like throw daggers and stuff like that, and she'll completely miss. And with that being the case, like, Brawl turns into a bear form once as they're like shooting all these crossbows at her, and they just pepper him with arrows instead. And he doesn't die, but he gets pretty hurt. And Valera kind of sort of begins to realize that she is maybe not in her right mind anymore, and that she is maybe letting her friends down by continuing down this path. But yeah, we know that it's not entirely gonna keep going that way.
It just took for someone to almost die for her to realize it.
Yeah, I guess so. And this is actually where the Dark Irons, one of them that's still alive, is basically trying to taunt Anvilmar, and he's like, yeah, we have your brother. He was trying to defend the Thandol Span when we took that shit from you, L. And he's like, yeah, that's great and all. He like pastes his brains into the concrete. And then Varian hears about this, and he's like, you know, the Thandol Span is also on the way to Ironforge. Maybe we should like rescue your brother before we get over there. And he's like, no, we don't got to do that. Like, I still got my orders from the king. And he's like, that's good, because now you can make sure that I get to Ironforge, but we're still taking the Thandol Span. Thank you for tuning into Tides of Lore. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow adventurers. Your support makes all the difference. Thank you. So, this is where they begin heading towards the Thandol Span, and they are attacked by Vendalin Soulfire. And he shows up, and immediately he sees Valera, who's going through withdrawal. And he's like, oh, feeling a little sick there, are you? Here, I got something for you. He tosses her some Fent. Not actually, he gives her a Fel curse. But it does overwhelm her with Fel energy and begins to actually corrupt her spirit. It hurts a lot, but regardless, it kind of feeds her addiction. And that's his whole point, is he wants to corrupt her by feeding this addiction.
Will she turn into a demon, or
maybe? But I guess I just see it kind of like an affliction warlock, how they curse people, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess that's kind of how I'm seeing it in my mind. But they fight with him. He talks a big game. He summons a Doom Guard. Thagras gets dragged into the air by this Doom Guard, and Brawl has some entangling roots grab it from the air and just fucking paste it into the ground. And then immediately Varian beheads him.
Oh.
So, yeah, really cool character. Has like 10 lines of dialogue. Dies to Varian immediately.
Varian's kind of a boss.
Oh, he is that. He's got that dog.
What can't he do? Fight off Felguard.
Fight Gul'dan. Yeah. But yeah, now they have this battle over. Valera is just trembling from basically a Fel overdose as it begins to sink real deep into her soul. And the group is then like, okay, let's quickly get his brother and quickly get to Ironforge, because shit is getting crazy. So they go to the Thandol Span, and they find these Dark Irons, and they start fighting with them. And Brawl uses like some rain clouds and some mist from, you know, being a druid to prevent them from being able to see them with their guns and stuff, as well as like watering their gunpowder so that the guns won't fire. And they start going crazy on them. There is a war golem there, which is those kind of stone creatures that you'll find in like Blackrock Mountain, that is along with them, as well as one of those, like, I would just call them dwarf tanks. I'm pretty sure you see these when you do the Battle for Winter Spring, that you can actually hop into and like to break down the walls.
Yeah.
So you see this for the first time, and they hijack one of these and they use it to kill the war golem. But they do hear that they are planting bombs, and they are planning to blow up the second half of the bridge, and that they have his brother basically imprisoned alongside these explosives. So they go rushing in. They find the guys that are holding his brother captive, and they're actually about to put his helmet on and then weld it to his face using fire.
That's kind of crazy.
It is pretty brutal. Like I said, they took the brutality factor, and they're just like, what if we went to like 12? But they come crashing in, they save him and prevent this from happening. But just as they free him, one of the Dark Irons that wasn't quite dead yet is just like, well, to hell with you guys, to hell with everything. Sets off one of the dynamite sticks that he's holding in his hand. And the brother of Thagras, who to be honest with you, I can't entirely, Halsmar or something like that? Halsmar. It's a difficult name. It's one of those Norse ones that I suck at. But sees this happening, dives on top of the grenade. And it explodes, but it doesn't set off all the explosives in the room. And as he's dying, he's just like, you're the last Anvilmar now. Like, take care of our legacy. And this is when Thagras puts on his brother's helmet that they were about to weld to his face, goes outside, and just floors the rest of the Dark Irons. They kind of get pinned down. And just as they're like, shit, what are we going to do? Magni shows up. and he's got a bunch of his dudes up on an airship with cannons and guns, and then they just rain fire down on these dudes and lay them out. So they manage to save the Thandol Span, and King Magni meets with this true Varian, and he is just like Varian Wrynn, I presume, and Varian's just, he's already like a way more competent and aware person than the other Varian was, so he is immediately recognizes him as the true king of Stormwind, basically. And he's like, yeah, I don't know if you know, but your doppelganger's getting up to quite literally some fuck shit over in Stormwind, so you should handle that so you can help handle our problems too.
He's finally getting the respect he deserves.
So they all hop onto Magni's airship. They start flying to Ironforge, and they arrive. And just as they do arrive, they're getting off. Valera's once again trembling and shit, but she's also like literally kind of dying at this point. And a bunch of the residents of Ironforge are kind of talking about the group. They're like, why is a night elf here? Is that a fucking blood elf? What the fuck? So they're all really suspicious about this. And as they're beginning to make their way through the gates of Ironforge, Valera, in her, seeking of mana, she sees a human standing behind Varian, holding what appears to be a spectral dagger pointed at his back. So she goes like, she doesn't necessarily mean to save him, because she's like, I need that dagger, and she stabs this creature in the back, and that is when it's revealed that this is not a human. This is a black dragon. And it's like, you mortals dare challenge me? And it turns back into a dragon and begins to fight with them, but immediately he's like, shit, I'm outnumbered. There's an entire raid party here. I should head out. And he dips.
Okay. So now we know dragons can be human.
Now they know this. They also know that black dragons are definitely working for this plot. It wasn't just some human that decided to split Varian. So they go into Ironforge, and using some sort of magical spell, he scries with Bolvar Fordragon over in Stormwind. And he's like, yep, black dragons are about. They're deceiving people. You need to keep your eye out if anyone looks super suspicious, like they might be deceiving people, and make sure that shit doesn't happen. And he's like, will do. I already have an idea who we might be talking about. Let's not talk too long over this magical phone, because, it already seems like really powerful magic's at play, so we don't want them catching on too quickly. That is when there is Varian and Anduin and Katrana out for like a jolly ride on their horses outside of Stormwind somewhere. The false Varian, that is. And somehow, some way, I would have to imagine Katrana has some play in this. It doesn't really show it, but it just shows that something strikes the back of Anduin's horse, like a rock, and the horse gets spooked, and it completely tumbles over a cliff. The clumsiest fucking horse I've ever seen, to be honest. And Anduin goes falling off as well. And this false Varian dives off of his horse and basically dives off the cliff as well, catching the edge of it with one hand and catching Anduin with the other. And as he catches Anduin, he also starts to get some memories back. He remembers being kidnapped by the Defias. He remembers being under a dark ritual and being under attack by Naga before snapping back to it and realizing, my son's still hanging from the cliff, drags him back up. And after he does drag him back up, Anduin's like, damn, I can't believe that I thought that you weren't my dad. Like, only my dad would make that sort of effort for me. And Varian's like, of course, like, I would do anything for you. And then Katrana comes up and she touches his shoulder, and she's like, you're so noble. Even in the darkest times, you managed to remain so resilient. And that's when he snaps back to being the puppet.
Yeah, he's too
just
close
like,
to
her. Yeah.
Like the other Varian was far away. Your influence, I feel like it was easier.
Yep. So he kind of just goes like, wait, where was I? What was I? It seems like for a moment there, the Varian's minds were almost merging in a way where he was becoming a lot more like the other Varian. And as soon as she touches him, he goes back to being a puppet. But this is actually something that Bolvar, trailing behind them, notices. And he, obviously having earlier scried with Magni, he's like, I think I have an idea. So with that being the case, the group is in Ironforge, our main group with the True King, and he is telling them like all that he knows and whatnot, and they're like, we need to figure out who exactly is plotting all of this. And that's when Magni tells him like, hey, I'm pretty sure in the Blackrock Depths, they're currently holding a prisoner who is like one of your marshals who is spouting some crazy shit, or at least that's what your kingdom used to be saying was some crazy shit. Maybe you should go free him, and he might be able to tell you exactly who you're looking for. And they're like, all right, cool. Brawl, Varian, Thagras, we're gonna go do that. And Valera's like, what the fuck? I'm not coming. And they're like, hell no, you're not coming. Do you have any idea? Do you have any idea how many arcane artifacts are in that mountain? Fuck no, you're not coming. And she is pissed off about this. I thought we were a team. I thought we were supposed to look out for each other. And that's when Brawl's like, we are looking out for each other. That's why you need to stay here. You need to kick this addiction or you're never going to be the same. And, you know, she's obviously super pissed off about it. But as they are leaving for the Blackrock Depths, she's kind of imprisoned in one of these, like, you know, those spires that you see outside of Ironforge that kind of pop out the side of the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
She's locked up in one of those. Basically a magical rehab.
Nice.
And she is just raging. They're giving her food and stuff, and she's like throwing it against the wall, and she's like, you betrayed me. I fucking hate all of you. I can't believe you would do this shit to me. She's like going off the walls. And then she kind of breaks down into a puddle of herself, and she's like, but you guys are right. Like, I know that I can't control this shit. And she begins to, you know, have the revelation that she is, in fact, under control by this mana addiction.
This sounds like the Onyxia attunement quest line now. Because you have to
go... the Onyxia attunement, yeah.
They call it Prison Break, dude. That quest sucks. I failed it the first time with my first group. And then you have to literally redo the instance if you fail it. You have to go out, reset. It's so terrible.
Yep.
But fun questline. Fun questline overall. Just that part sucks.
And there is more of that Onyxia attunement that actually leads up to this. So we'll get into that in just a second. With Valera, though, it is kind of crazy because as she's losing her mind and seeing all this go on, she actually sees visions of her parents. And I'm pretty sure her parents are dead. I don't know if we ever actually truly get confirmation about this, but they're like glowing white figures, and they're like, yeah, I'm so sorry, our daughter, that they're doing this to you. I can't believe that they're being so mean. And she sees visions of them, and she's like, we have to go now. And they leave out the window of this tower. And Valera's like, wait, no, wait. And she goes to follow them. And as she stumbles out this window and falls all the way to the base of fucking the Dunmoreau Mountains, you see her body all folded on the ground. Aegwynn comes to her, and she's like, this isn't real. You are just going through like mana withdrawal, and they're trying to basically have you give up so that they can have your body. And this is where it is kind of revealed that these are, in fact, demons kind of manifesting as her parents in an attempt to control her body. She's like, don't do this. Like I told you, you got to stay alive. Remember, don't die. I will do all I can to help you. Just don't die. And then you do kind of get another scene where she snaps back conscious and realizes that was all just a vision. She's still laying in the bed in the tower. And that's kind of where she leaves off until they go into the Blackrock Depths. So with our true king, Brawl, and Thagras going into the Blackrock Depths, they enter in. They fight a bunch of Dark Iron Dwarves and Lava Elementals and some more War Golems. They even come across the boss that's in the prison area for the Blackrock Depths, High Interrogator Gerstan.
Mm-hmm.
She's interrogating the guy that they're looking for, and they're like, knock, knock, and she's like, what is this? And they don't actually show her dying, which I'm not sure why, but I have to imagine that they fucking pasted her.
Because why not?
Because the next panel, they literally cut to them just freeing this marshal, and it's just like, what happened to her? Where'd she go? Where'd she go? But they fight them, and as they're making their way running out, they go through the area where you would encounter the fire elemental boss guy that's on like that thin platform. He'll knock you back into the lava. They're basically bolting out that way. They actually manage to, they're just like, they run a certain distance, and then as this lava elemental is like standing there to face them, it says that he just melts the floor beneath everybody, and they fall into the lava below. And I'm just like, that's convenient. What the fuck? But they do manage to get this marshal, fight their way back out of the Blackrock Depths, and begin to make their way back to Ironforge. And I have to imagine that this is over like a week or two span, because by the time that they do get back to Ironforge, there is Valera greeting them at the gates.
Uh-oh.
And no, thankfully, I
Don't
was like,
trust her.
I did it. I'm good. No more Fent.
Oh, she kicked it. Cold turkey,
She
huh?
manages to, yeah, I guess she cold turkeys it. Do you have to imagine because there's like multiple panels where Aegwyn's like, I will do what I can for you. So I have to imagine that she might have like magically helped her to overcome this. She's kind of an expert in fel magic at this point, I would imagine. So maybe that's the case. But yeah, she manages to kick it. And, you know, she jumps into Brawl's arms and is like, I'm happy to see you guys back. And I'm all good now. We can all go to Stormwind together. And they're like, we're happy to hear it. We're happy to see you. This Marshal has something to say. Marshal looks at the group and everyone in Ironforge and is like, yeah, there is a black dragon controlling Stormwind. Her name's Katrana Prestor, and she is actually the black dragon Onyxia. And that's all he really knows about that. He's like, but we're going to go and we're going to confront her and we're going to go fuck her up. And they're just like, sounds like a plan. So with the Marshal, with Anvilmar, Valera, Brawl, and Varian, they all make their way to the gates of Stormwind. And as they arrive at the gates of Stormwind, they're like, maybe we should sneak in. Like, if it truly is as corrupt in there as we think that it is, like, maybe it's not a good idea to go through the front gate. And Varian's just basically like, no, I want them to know, basically, that I'm coming. I want the whole city to see that their true king has returned. So as he arrives with this really high-ranking marshal of their military and they begin to make their way in, they go, and as they enter, they blare the horns, basically indicating that the king has returned to Stormwind. So they're going in. The whole city is like, wait, isn't he up in the keep right now? What the fuck? And even up in the keep, you have Katrana and Varian laying in bed together. Nothing crazy going on, but it does imply something.
Interesting.
And she's like running her finger through his hair or some shit. And that's when, they're just like shooting the shit and they hear the horns blaring too. And they rush out to the balcony and they see walking down the streets with this marshal, Varian Wrynn, and, all of his companions. And she, begins yelling at the guards, like, get them, they're fucking imposters, they're coming here to kill the king or some shit like that. And the current marshal that's watching over Stormwind, gets in their way with a bunch of his guards, and he's like, I can't let you through. And the marshal that is there with him, with Varian, like, stands chest to chest with him, basically, and he's like, we both served under Turalian together. Do you really think that I would ever do anything to harm the Alliance? Like, think. And he goes, he thinks about it for a second, and he's like, all right then. And he starts walking behind them as well, as they all begin to make their way into the keep. Katrana rushes down to the throne room, and she's like, call for Anduin. And this is something that actually sets off the imposter Varian. He's like, wait, why are you calling for my son? And they go into the keep, and the Varian squad busts through the door with the marshal and with all of their soldiers. And as they do, they basically are like, your jig's up, Katrana, or should I say Onyxia. And she's like, yeah. And the false Varian's like, why do you keep calling for my son? And she's like, you're a useless puppet, basically. And as she begins to transform into her dragon form, she sends him flying into the wall. And this is where it is revealed to everybody in Stormwind that Katrana is actually Onyxia. And there's a big battle. Kind of goes crazy. It also is revealed that all of the king's guards are actually dragons as well, or dragonkin, rather. So they are like these four-legged reptilian creatures that have like big-ass scythes. And you actually see all of this, like Tim said, if you were to do the Onyxia attunement quest, this is basically story for story how it goes.
Yeah, she kills a marshal, though, I think. She definitely kills someone. Oh, yeah? Because I remember that in the fight, the dragonkin, guards, they turn just like you said. And yeah, she like one-shot someone.
Yep. So hearing the horns, Anduin was actually training with Bolvar, just, fucking around with him. I can't entirely remember. But they hear the horns. So they begin to rush to the throne room as well. And as Anduin rounds one of these corners, one of these dragonkins there before him, and it grabs him by the neck. And it's like, yeah, you're coming with us. And Bolvar runs his sword through the side of its head. as it does. And he's just like, not while I'm here, buddy. So they actually do manage to get to the throne room. And when they arrive in the throne room, they see just chaos. They see two Varians fighting with dwarves and elves and all sorts of crazy shit going on as they are battling with Onyxia in her full dragon form now. And Bolvar's like, stay here, Anduin. I'm going to go help your dad. So he goes rushing in, and, there's a lot of action panels, a lot of fighting. There is actually a scene where Anduin, who previously with the false Varian was learning how to use the bow, draws an arrow and actually shoots one of these dragonkin in the back of the head, saving Bolvar from when he was about to get stabbed in the back. And he's like, that's great. I'm supposed to be protecting you. Didn't you know that? And that is where you will see the Marshal kind of talking shit to Onyxia and being like, the gig is up. I've revealed you. And she's like, well, at least I can do this. And she just flame breaths and turns him into a pile of ash.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
And he dies. And now, with all this chaos going on, Anduin now sees two of his dad, and they're actually fighting with each other because they're like, you're working for Onyxia, and he's like, how do I know that you're not working for Onyxia? Kind of a generic movie plotline, like, shoot the real one. And Anduin just looks and says to both of them, he's like, can't we solve this later? Don't you guys have a bigger problem? And they actually both look at each other, and they go, he has a point. And the other Varian says, he always was a bright kid. And this is kind of where you realize that the only thing that both Varians through and through were completely dedicated to is Anduin. Like you even said when Varian was first going through his super big depression before being split in two, was the only thing that would ever get him to want to do anything was to be with Anduin. So they're like, all right, we'll handle this later. They begin fighting with Onyxia. And as they're all going off on him, Anduin tries to shoot an arrow at Onyxia. It just bounces off of her because she's a fucking dragon. And no one in the room is really doing too much damage. But she sees Anduin shoot this arrow, and she's like, that's a good play, actually. Grabs Anduin, and is just like, I'll catch you guys later, and disappears.
That's a bad move. Okay.
Yeah. So, the Marshal is now dead. The two Varians are kind of bickering with one another. But they, like I said, they still agree that there is one thing that they need to do before anything can happen, and they must go get Anduin. So they are like, get all of our elite knights, get everyone ready. We're going to Duskwalla Marsh. I don't entirely remember who tells them this, but they're just like, yeah, we know that her lair is somewhere in Duskwalla Marsh. So that's where we're going. Get an airship ready. Tell Jaina to prepare to meet with us. We're coming. And the two halves of Varian have one purpose now, basically. So they begin to fly on an airship across the Great Sea to meet with Jaina and rescue Anduin. On the way there, they're going back and forth with their memories. Like, what do you remember? What do you remember? And they do fully piece together the events of what happened on Alkaz Island, as well as, one getting kidnapped by Nago. This is where it would all be revealed in the story. I told it earlier because it makes it less confusing, but this is where it all comes together for them as characters. Black dragons set upon their airship, and at first I was like, oh, here we go, another 6 panels of combat. But Brawl goes crazy during this fight. He calls in lightning, smokes a bunch of them. They just fall from the sky. And he also calls up seaweed from the ocean that just grab some of them and drag them into the depths of the ocean. And I'm like, oh my god, Brawl, you're the second greatest druid to ever live.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
So they pretty quickly just managed to kill all of these dragons, continue their way forward, and then they land in Theramore. All the troops are getting off the ship. They're getting ready to go. And Jaina kind of goes and tries to do a ritual on them. She's like, I can't put you guys back together, but, as long as you guys got your purpose, I know exactly where Onyxia's lair is, so I'll take you there. But this is actually where she gives them 2 magically enchanted blades, one for each Varian. They're called Shalator and Elamane. And this is like Varian's iconic weapon.
And that weapon is used by a lot of people. I swear even like Sourfang used it fighting Sylvanas.
I'm trying not to think about what happens to that beautiful weapon during Shadowlands, but I've complained enough about Shadowlands throughout this series, so I'll leave that for the Shadowlands. Anyway, the Stormwind Knights with Varian and his little party begin to make their way to the Onyxia's lair. And this is where it kind of cuts to Anduin inside the lair, and he's being pinned against these rocks where she's like, even if you do break free, the floor has these cracks in it. And if you step in the wrong place, you're just going to fall straight through. And even if you do get away, my children over there at the door would be happy to eat you. So make your decision wisely. And Anduin's just like, yeah, cool story, bro. Anyway, breaks free and runs anyway. And he's just got like a broken rock that he's trying to use to fight off these dragons. He doesn't really kill any of them, but he does manage to like hide away in certain like small holes and stuff like that will prevent them from really reaching at him. And that is where you have them arriving at Onyxia's lair with Jaina Proudmoore and everyone else. And as they just fight off all of these dragonkin that are standing in front of Onyxia's lair, you have Valera finally feeling good again, just smoking all these dudes. And you have the spellcasters along with Jaina Proudmoore just smoking these dudes. And she's also just like enchanting everyone's arrows as they're being fired. So they're like magically just piercing through the dragon's armor. And then cool. They go inside. Yeah. And then they go inside. And there's even like those bigger dragonkin that you see when you actually do Onyxia's lair. And Brawl and Jaina immediately just freeze and like shatter them into pieces. And even the rest of the group kind of looks back and they're like, why are we even here? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, just do that.
Exactly. But then they enter the area where Onyxia is. And Onyxia, she does actually manage to get a hold of Anduin again. She has him in his claw. And she's like, if you guys come any closer, I'm going to kill your son. And Anduin just kind of yells back at them, she's going to kill me anyway. Do what you're going to do. So one of the Varians throws a knife at her hand that she's using to hold him. And as it pierces into it, she like kind of throws her arm and lets go. And he ends up falling into a pit of dragon eggs. 50 DKP minus.
Many whelps, left side.
Many whelps, left side. Yeah. So they all start to spawn. And Brawl turns into a bird form and he picks up Anduin and flies out of there. So I guess they don't really have to deal with that too much, at least not as much as the guild would. But they are fighting like these whelplings, and they're fighting with Onyxia, and now having all their weapons basically magically enchanted by Jaina. They are dealing a lot more damage to it. And during this fight, the dragon kind of spins around and manages to hit Jaina with the tail attack. So, she stood in the wrong spot. It's tough. And she gets knocked unconscious, kind of. So now it is kind of just up to the melee characters, and they're all trying to fight with her, but they're not really getting too much damage done now when she looks at the true king of Varian, and she begins to cast the same spell that she used to split him in half the first time. So it seems like she's trying to split him in half again. And as this like beam of purple magic energy goes flying towards him, the false Varian, kind of doing the first truly heroic thing that he's done in this story, dives in front of him. And instead of splitting them in half, it goes through both of them and seems to kind of magically backfire as it then unites the two Varians back into one Varian. And now he's got the super badass pauldrons and the Charlemagne, the united sword that has the glowing magical center to it that we pretty iconically see Varian wield.
And he like separate it and
and that's why he can separate it, because originally it was two swords, but when they united the two Variants, it became one sword. So Varian is just kind of like, well, that sucks for you, buddy. Immediately dives at Onyxia, and as he drives Charlemagne through the skull of this dragon, she dies. Canonically, it would seem that Varian Wrynn basically kills Onyxia, not entirely on his own, but pretty close to it.
I mean, have you seen the videos? I saw someone two-man Onyxia.
Yeah,
so it can be done. It can be done.
You just need, I think they had a priest and warrior in that too.
Yeah,
kind of does make sense.
And like full max gear.
Charlemagne driven through the skull of this dragon, she dies, and he then draws the blade out of her skull. And as Varian's remaining companions look at him and only see one Varian, they're like, which one are you? They're like, are you Logush? Are you Varian? And he just replies, one and the same. And that's when he cradles his son Anduin, and they, have a little happy dance and a celebration for their victory over Onyxia. And just to really stick it to her, Varian takes Charlemagne and cuts her head off in one swing. And then that is pretty much where our story kind of comes to an end for Varian Wrynn. That's where you'll get Varian leading into the Burning Crusade and the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, why he is who he is. And also why when they return to Stormwind, they have the massive head of Onyxia in tow.
Oh, so like you turning in that head, like they actually did that. They just hung it up.
They actually hang it from the gates of Stormwind in the lore.
That's pretty badass.
I gotta agree. Varian and Anduin returning to the gates of Stormwind to the cheers of the audience.
Returning Stormwind to greatness.
And that is where our story ends for today. Do you have any other questions for us, Tim?
So, us doing that in the game, the whole, because you do even the confronting the Onyxia. It's like you and the Marshal and Bolvar. But that didn't happen. It was this.
See, it seems like during this time period, because this is about the same time that the Ashbringer comic came out too. And if you remember, the Ashbringer comic kind of rewrites history, having these named characters go and fight in Naxxramas and stuff like that instead of you as well. So it seems like they really liked having named characters do the stuff that you did, which is why I do find it kind of funny when people are like, I missed when we were the heroes and we felt like we were doing stuff instead of the main characters. And I'm like, well, canonically, that was never really you. But yeah, they seem to do something similar in this comic where they replace the player character with these named characters in their story.
Interesting.
Well, thank you guys for joining us on this episode. I hope that you enjoyed learning about Varian Wrynn. He is probably the greatest warrior to fucking exist, at least for the humans. There's Broxigar for the orcs.
I was gonna say there's some more pretty cool, man.
But to me, this story makes it like the concept of him fighting Garrosh during the Wrath of the Lich King hilarious. I'm like, man, Garrosh does not know who he's fighting with. And Varian will continue to go on and do a lot of other stuff in the Mists of Pandaria and Legion and so on and so forth. So we're definitely not done with him. Our king has returned to Stormwind, and we'll catch back up with him around the Wrath of the Lich King. But follow us on socials if you are interested in keeping up to date with what we're doing. Other than that, we will catch you guys on the next episode where we're going to be getting back into more of the Black Dragons, because this was kind of the first story for the Black Dragons, and it's a beefy one, so we needed some more time with it. But now we're actually going to get into Nefarian and Deathwing's plots during the Bladewing Spire and stuff like that.
Oh, nice. I love that.
Bladewing Spire? Blackrock Spire? Blackwing Lair. That's what it is.
He does some crazy experiments and stuff. It's going to be...
Oh, yes. Those Black Dragons are looking to get their flight back into greatness as well. So we'll check in with them soon. But thank you guys for listening, and we will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this episode. Your guys' support truly means the world to us. If you're interested in hearing more, we have our full show on YouTube and Spotify, new episodes dropping every Tuesday. I also want to take this moment to give a special thank you to Fantasy Lo-Fi for providing the music for this episode. You can find them on YouTube at Fantasy Lo-Fi or on Spotify under Bits and Hits. Be sure to show them some love, as their music does truly bring this journey to life. Once again, thank you for joining us on Tides of Lore, and we will see you next week.